Hey everyone, this is Scott from certmedia.com. In this video, we're just reviewing the Enfold theme. I'm going to be going over its settings. I'm going to be going over really who this theme is targeted for and whether you should actually purchase it. The Enfold theme is a great theme. It has many options in it, and it's relatively easy to use out of the box. It's primarily meant for small business websites, which if you've already deployed it on your website, you know, and it does look pretty decent. It's also not that bad in performance, so long as you don't use Layer Slider. Now, let's run through the theme options and we're going to talk about some of the demos. I have one imported. It is the game demo. And it looks kind of like a gaming business for a mobile app. And we are going to discuss it. So the first options you have under the front page settings is basically the same setting underneath settings and reading, where you can declare your home page if you have it set to a specific page that you built with the builder. We'll talk about the builder at some point as well, and it works relatively easy. You just select your page. If you have a blog page on your website, you can choose to paste the URL here for the page, and it will load it just fine. Underneath your logo, you can choose to do a couple of things. You can just upload it and it'll automatically add it. You can enter the URL or the ID of the logo if it's already been uploaded to your server as well, which can be useful if you're using a third-party CDN to render the image. They recommend using a 340 by 156 logo, and that's totally fine by me. The favicon, you can upload your favicon relatively easily. I personally don't recommend using this option. I recommend going into Appearance, Customize, go to Site Identity, and upload your favicon there, because it'll also add it to the back end, and it will do resizing. Under page preloading, this just has a nice little preload banner, which is that little screen that has the little rotation transition. This is just fine. Page transitions, when navigating from one page to the next, this will, I'll show you what it does. Yeah, it basically, if you have a second page that you're going to, it tries to give the users the sense that it's the same page. So it gives it that same loading effect. The Lightbox model window. So a model window is you click like a link or a button and it opens up in a window, and it can be used for a video or an image. You can click this to enable the default, uncheck it if you want to use a model window plugin. I would just recommend using this one. It looks fine out of the box. It's used for their videos, and frankly, it's all you really need it to do, and it's fairly lightweight. Example, don't ask why the play button is up there. It's not cooperating with me today. Custom error 404 page. You can just set a 404 page if you design a 404 page with the Avia builder, you can customize it and display it here. This is actually a good thing to do. You should design a 404 page using the Avia builder, because it allows you to have a brandable 404 page that's more useful than saying, hey, there's nothing here. Maintenance mode, if you just want to have a simple maintenance mode enabled, you can check this option. That's fine. That's really all I have to say about it. You can select if you want to use the block or classic editor without needing a plugin, and pre-processing shortcodes in the header is really meant for SEO plugins. Under the general layout, you can modify the logo and main menu area. So you can choose number one to have a stretched layout, which is when the content is stretched all the way from the left side of the viewport. You can choose to have a boxed layout, and it'll show you in this image a rough preview of what it looks. A boxed layout or a fixed frame. You've seen this in other themes. Stretched is full width, and that's what I recommend for most designs. A boxed layout may be good if you're trying to do a news type website and you need to have the black bars on the side so that we can have an image, maybe an advertisement. A fixed frame is just really the boxed layout, but it has a frame width at the top. Underneath dimensions, so responsive site, you can enable or disable the responsive design. Don't ever check that option. It should always be responsive. Maximum container width. This is essentially the maximum width for your site in pixels or in a percentage. So this is the max width that your site will physically stretch its content to. And it's set to 1310 for this demo. If you imported another demo, it'll look slightly different, and you can set it to whatever number you want. Basically, if you have really wide displays or even like a TV, You can set the maximum width if you're trying to design your site for all screens. Keep in mind that when you're designing for very large screens, though, it's eventually just going to look like you're stretched out because you can only have so much content, for instance, in your header to fit like a 40-inch TV, 50-inch TV, to have it stretch out. Basically, this menu where it says home and down to credits, if you had a very large display, you're not going to be able to make it look appropriate. It would look kind of like this. My hands are off the camera. And that's the point. It's just not a very good thing to do. Leave it at whatever default it is in your demo that you choose to import, but don't really go too large because it's not going to look too good. Under the general settings, this is where you can modify really just the color scheme of your website. And you can also modify your fonts. You could choose a predefined color scheme, which it'll give you a rough preview as well of what your front-end color scheme will look like. So it says modern black, and you can go ahead and check each one of these. All of their demos will just pick whichever one was in there. So one of the things I always say about theme forest themes is if you're going to buy them, import the demo that looks the best. You want a demo from these all-in-one themes that fits the design that you're trying to go for, because these themes after a certain point become relatively inflexible at making custom designs without doing a substantial amount of heavy work when you could just use something like Elementor and get a lot easier design out of the book. But this theme has good demos like this one, so just keep that in mind. The customization section down here is relatively easy. You can select what colors you want things to be. You can, by selecting this, you can do RGB, or you could just paste in a hex value for your colors. You can just have a background image of behind your logo area. Under the main content area, you can set one for the background as well. If you want a quick CSS, as I mentioned here, enter them here and they'll be applied to the theme. It's just a custom CSS box that you can modify for custom styles. It should be consistent across all of these, all the quick CSS. The quick CSS box is the same in each tab. And you can really just go through here and do whatever you want. For the body background, this option is only available for box or framed layouts, so keep this in mind. And for fonts, you should be able to choose virtually any of the Google fonts. You can also choose some web-safe fonts. Web-safe fonts are fonts that are pre-installed on systems, so you can use those if you don't want to fetch a Google font, which can be slower. And you can set your default content font size for most of your website. Under advanced styling, this is when you can modify every specific type of element. And when I mean every, I mean you can really get into specific HTML tags, the main menu, the cookie consent info, various parts of the theme like the breadcrumbs and the widget titles and the widget links, slideshows. You can modify each of the elements here, and you'll basically get a subset of options to modify text decoration, the display type, font size, font weight, line height, font family, background color, font color, or obviously if it's for an icon, you can go ahead and change the icon type, the icon color, overlay color, background colors. You can modify basically anything you would want to in the section for any of the main elements. It is overwhelming in my opinion. For most users, this section is overwhelming. As it mentions, this feature is an active beta. It works. I've never seen a time when it doesn't work unless you have a theme or plugin that's incompatible. It's very similar to something like Yellow Pencil, but it isn't a front-end editor. So keep that in mind. But I wouldn't go too crazy with this section because it goes deep and you can modify it way too many options. Under the main menu, you can choose how your menu acts and what's displayed. So for instance, menu items for desktop, it'll display it as a text or an icon. If you choose to display the burger icon desktop, it will also be used on tablets and mobile. So basically, if you display it as an icon, you click it and it'll open up the menu. If it's displayed as text, you can choose to use an alternate menu for mobile. So main menu, Enfold main menu, or you can use the same main menu as you had on your desktop. The menu items for mobile, though, you can choose to specify the browser width. By default, it'll do tablets and smartphones, or you can set it to only do smartphones. Keep in mind, though, if you do it for tablets, test it on a tablet like an iPad. Just see how it renders, because if you have very large main menu on desktop, it may cross over and look quite odd on a tablet. I'd also recommend finding like a smaller tablet just to test it if you have one, or you can use the browser dev tools to pretend as one of those tablets, because if you have a really small tablet that's between 990 pixels and 768 pixels, that can give a very different experience. The separator between the main menus, you can choose to have a small, large, or no separator at all. You can choose to have a search icon, and it will use an Ajax search functionality, which means when you click it, you start typing and it will find the page. Don't worry about the icons not working. They'll be fine for yours. They're just broken online. The burger and mobile menu, you can modify the icon style, what type of menu you want, the flyout menu, minimal, classic, or full page overlay. And you can choose to modify the burger menu icon itself for the width of the flyout menu and the color of said icon. Under the header, you have many options, mostly just positioning of the logo under the top layout. One thing is under the header behavior, you can enable the sticky header and the shrinking header. Shrinking header is when you scroll, the header will shrink its height so that way it takes up less of the viewport. You can also choose if you have a top bar enabled, which is just a secondary menu on top of the main menu, if you want to unstick that and only have the main menu follow. Typically, your top bar is used for social icons and maybe some important links you need to share. I wouldn't recommend in most cases having it follow you, but you can choose to unstick it. Extra elements, you could choose to enable social icons or a phone number or extra text that you want to add, or a secondary menu. Transparency options, you can add a transparency logo and a transparency menu color. Sidebar settings, modify the position of the sidebar on a variety of pages or to have no sidebar at all. You can choose to have a sidebar on smartphones, which is displayed on the actual content. I personally recommend turning the sidebar off for mobile users because nobody cares about the sidebar on mobile devices. They just don't. Frankly, what happens is your footer tends to have more useful content in it than the sidebar does. However, if you're on a blog page and you may have an advertisement or something in the footer that you're driving people to, maybe it's a newsletter sign up form, that would be a time when you may want to leave it. But personally, I'm not too much of a fan of having the sidebar on smartphone devices. And then you can choose to display sidebar navigation for all nested sub pages of a page automatically. That's nothing too crazy to worry about. You shouldn't even need to check that. Underneath footer, you can modify quite a bit. So number one, you can just put your copyright info right in here and it will output it on the front end of the page. You can choose to display your social icons, which will be displayed in the social profile section. I'll show you that in here in a second. And you can choose to display only the socket, so that way there's no footer widget. A socket is really just like a hard-coded feature like social profile, so it'll show the social icons in the footer. You could choose to display only the footer widgets, so you can add widgets to the footer and that's what it'll show. You could display the footer widgets in the socket. You could just choose to not display the socket or the footer widgets, or for page-based footer options, you could choose to select a page to display as the footer and the socket. So you could build a custom footer as a page and use that as your footer. The layout builder settings are primarily meant to modify the layout builder. You can disable the advanced builder preview. You only should really need to do this if you're having performance issues on the back end. You can choose to lock the advanced layout builder. This will remove the ability to move or delete existing template build elements. You can choose to block it for admins. Basically, if you have somebody who's on your website that you've given access to the builder to, but you don't want them to have the ability to delete existing template builders or to add new ones, you can lock it to only administrators. You can also choose to hide the template builder developer options, which is under the advanced tab. I'll show you this here in a little bit. Options toggle in the model window, you can use the toggle feature or disable toggle and display all options. The toggle feature is fine. The automated schema markup, you can enable or disable it. I recommend enabling it. Integrated bundled layer slider plugin. If you're not going to use a slider, which I don't really recommend, you need to disable this. Sliders are really bad for performance and they don't really do much for users. Users almost never watch the slider after the first slide. Under the blog layout, you can just enable and disable share elements and various blog meta options. Under the social profiles, this is where you can add your various icons. So you can have Twitter, Facebook, Dribbble. You can also modify or add new ones. So special and email icon, your RSS, WhatsApp, YouTube, Yelp, Zing, VK, Vimeo, etc., etc., etc. All of them are here. All of them. It works great. Just include the URL that you're provided to here, and it will display it. Only enable the important ones. I wouldn't add your RSS feed personally. One thing users tend to do when they have access to all their social profiles is they tend to link all of them, thinking it'll give them more follows. Only do the ones that you're actually active on, and only do the ones that people are actually going to care about. So while you have an option for, say, Flickr, I can't think of anybody who uses Flickr still. And I have a Flickr account. Under performance, we covered that in the performance optimization video on how to optimize this theme. Under the privacy settings, this is basically help you get GDPR compliance and handle cookies. You can add your privacy policy message to a variety of your forms. You have a privacy shortcode, so allow the user to disable the use of Google Maps or ReCaptcha in their browser or Google Web Fonts, and you can enable all of this. There's a lot in here for GDPR compliance. You can also enable cookie consent message if you're in a country that requires it. You can enable it, and hey, if you click this and you consent to our cookies, and that's all it does. But it's baked into the theme as instead of using a plugin, which is probably beneficial for your performance. Under the newsletter, you can add a MailChimp API key. This will connect with the newsletter widget that they have, and it will allow users to subscribe to your MailChimp newsletter. Under Google services, you can enable things like Google Analytics tracking, paste your tracking code in here. Under the Google Maps section, you can just go ahead and disable Google Maps if you're not going to use it. I never recommend using the Google Maps API. I always recommend just using an iframe embed because then it can be lazy loaded and it's much better for your performance. And you have to pay for the API key now. Under ReCaptcha, if you are using ReCaptcha, go ahead and try using the ReCaptcha version 2. Because ReCaptcha version 2 is just the click, I'm not a robot button. It's pretty ambiguous now. The ReCaptcha v3, which needs a version 2 as a fallback verification. What this does is it will analyze the behavior. It's what adds a little badge in the right-hand corner. It's called the invisible ReCaptcha, even though you can see the little floating button. And you add your API keys. And it will, if the determines the user is a bot, it will flag them and ask them to do the button instead of automatically making them click the button. Demo import allows you to import all of their demos. That's how I got the demo on here. I just imported it through this menu. Under the import and export options, you can modify a couple of things. So you can export your theme options if you want to re-import them or you want to back them up. You can select the theme options to reset. So if you don't want to reset all of your theme options, you could choose to just reset some of them, or you could choose to keep, say, your quick CSS, but reset all the other options. The export layout builder templates, if you built a layout builder template, you can export it and re-import it. This is good if you're using it to design multiple websites, and you can just upload it within the same menu. The icon font manager allows you to upload your own custom icon fonts, Font Awesome or in typo Fontello. And your custom font manager allows you to upload regular text fonts that you would use. You already have access for, it's intended for use for the Google WebKit fonts, but keep in mind that you already have access to Google Fonts. The only reason you'd want to use this is if you wanted to host the Google Fonts locally for better performance. And under the theme update, you can import your Envato API key. It'll tell you that you're running X version and give you this general information. Now, I'm going to show you what the builder looks like because that's what's important with this theme. It has its own custom builder as opposed to Elementor or anything else. The layout element, it looks a little dated, but it actually works very easily and straightforward. You add your elements. You could choose to add a row or a tab section or a grid or a colored section. You can split your content up in a variety of means. You can just drag and drop your elements in. So if you want to have like a code block right above the slider or something, you can paste it right in there. And you can do this with any of the visible widgets that are included in here. Under the media elements, you gain access to a couple of items that you really want to just drag and drop on there. Video files primarily. Images, easy sliders. Keep in mind that you shouldn't use layer slider, which this demo did, unfortunately. Try and use one of the built-in sliders, or just use an image with text over it as a cover photo. That's going to yield you much better performance. And as for the Google Map, if you do not have the Google Map API key, you will not be able to use this. But if you want to use the embed code by going to Google Maps, sharing it, and grabbing the iframe code that it gives you, just paste it in a code block and that'll render it just fine on the front end. One more interesting detail about this is, say you have a 1-3-1 section. So like right here, it's a 1 out of 5, 3 out of 5. You can actually increase the width of this. So you can do this for any elements dynamically, and it will automatically do the resizing and pushing it down on the new row. You can just do this too if you want to easily modify or delete a column element. So for instance, if I bump this up to 2/5, I could just easily drag and drop it to reposition my content wherever I want it to go. And it just allows you to easily modify how your content's displayed. If you want to modify, say, a background color, you click on the section you want to modify, and you can change the styling details. You can modify advanced settings to hide it on mobile devices. It's basically like every other page builder, just with their own sense of style to it. The theme does integrate with the block editor. Your layout settings will appear over here on the right-hand side of the screen, and they work without much issue. Really, it's a good theme. Now we're going to talk about some of the negatives. This theme is all-encompassing, and by that I mean the theme does everything for your website. It will be your page builder, your contact form. It basically does everything. The problem with that comes down to migration. Down the line, if you decide you don't want to use this theme and you want to swap to a different framework, you're going to need to just do an entire redesign. Now, most themes and most plugins are exactly that way anyways. For instance, even the big page builder right now being Elementor is still something you have to worry about. If you build it on a theme that has its own custom elements or modifies those elements to a custom style, even though the elements will still be there when you swap from Elementor, you're still going to have to just redesign all the elements anyways, because the styling is now lost. And you can move the styling over, but then you run into the secondary issue of the performance aspect of just copying and pasting large amounts of styles over. It's something to keep in mind. If this is a theme you could see yourself using for a long time, the developer has kept it up to date for a very long time and still is actively updating it, then it's a good theme for you. Just keep in mind, though, about the long-term effects of using a own one theme like this is you have little to no options if the developer either stops developing it or you want to swap frameworks. This is in contrast to something like Avada, which is another option on ThemeForce, where Avada, because they've been around so long and they are the biggest selling theme, they kind of get a pass. This is more of a one-off theme, but I can say that I have a client that actually still uses this theme, and he's had it since, I think 2015 is when he first got it. And he was running on an old version, and I updated him from like version 3 to version 4. And with minimal fixing, it worked just fine. So that is something to keep in mind. Still updated, good developer, but long-term wise, you do need to think about that if you're somebody who frequently modifies your design. Otherwise, make sure to like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.